I would like to say hello to everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the area where you are. As Tino was saying, this is the last webinar we are doing for 2020, and but we are already planning and scheduling. It's already scheduled some other additional webinar for 2021. And very soon we will have also other new topics and subjects we will cover with the webinar. So today's webinar is an overview, a life cycle overview of 61511, one of the most important standard in the process automation environment. So since I have the control, I can try to go on.
There's maybe a small delay.
Yeah, you know, the first slide is always a little bit slow to start. Not so slow normally. Okay, so some few details about the speaker. Tino, most important participant to this webinar, is our functional safety director at GMI. We will talk a little bit about GMI later on, a few words before to jump into the topic. Myself is Mauro Perego. I'm sales director at the GMI since 3 years. I have a background in the environment of functional safety. And okay, but here I'm just introducing Tino and the subject. So let me proceed shortly in describing what GMI is doing. GMI is what we do. We do engineer and manufacture, let me say, a set of field interface. And characteristic of the field interface we develop is to cover 2 aspects of safety. One, it is intrinsic safety, and the other one, it is functional safety. So our product, they are either SEAL certified, or let me say suitable for SEAL application, intrinsic safe certified, or both of them. You find our equipment in several packages in several automation industrial sector, like oil and gas, petrochemical, pharmaceutical, food, and the package we normally cover are like TCS, ESD, fire and gas, HIPS, and so on and so on. The company has 40-year experience in covering these 2 topics, intrinsic safe and functional safety. We have 100% of production here in Italy, even we are present worldwide. We will see later where we are. Having the safety as the main topic and argument of our product, of course, quality is following as well, and it is one of the most important part of our production, our engineering. So we do everything here in Italy, and we do test 100% before it leave the company and reach the customer. And this is just a short overview of the product we cover. I say the field interface, we cover intrinsic safe barrier, we have safety relay up to SEAL3, we have isolator. Whenever intrinsic safety is not necessary, but it is necessary to make isolation between field and the system. Here we have isolator. Even in this case, we have this isolator suitable for SEAL application up to SEAL3. We have power supply systems. Even in this case, we cover up to SEAL3 requirement, and you can install these power supplies in hazardous location up to zone 2. We have temperature and digital multiplexer system, as well as a hard multiplexer. Since we are dealing with a lot of MEC, main automation contractor, we have a lot of customized termination board and termination solution for most of the TCS, PLC, ESD system. We have surge protector solution as well, loop indicators, and finally, we have this last bullet, we mean functional safety and intrinsic safety, AX department. Tino is the director of the functional safety one, and through this department we deliver knowledge to our customer. We deliver webinars, as you know, but we deliver also training. We have training program which also has a certification at the end of the training, which are time to time and very often now requested by the market, and we provide also further services through our through these two departments. Going ahead, as said, we are in Italy, but we are present worldwide. These are just number of our presence worldwide. We have subsidiary, of course. Wherever we don't have subsidiary, we have local distributor or agent. So our focus is always to be near to the customer need, to collect requirement and to follow up. Of course, being present worldwide, we have also almost all certification necessary to be used in any specific countries. As you know, when we are dealing with intrinsic safety, there are a lot of local requirements. I have in mind in the Middle East, I have in mind in Russia, for example, in the United States, you have UL certification. In Russia as well, you have specific certification. So what I want to say is we are covering all that. So we are somehow a reliable partner for international projects. These are what you see in this slide, which you will receive later on by email. You see just some of the important customer we have divided by kind of customer, like system vendor, PPC, OEM, and users. And before to leave the speech to the topic, to Tino, to face the topic of today, I want just to mention a few things. You will receive an email with the presentation, but you will also have the chance to follow this presentation on our YouTube channel, as well other webinars that we have already provided and then follow up us, because as said in the beginning, we will have new topics for 2021. We are working out on a new schedule and a new content to deliver to the market. I'm sure you will find of interest for you. But Tino, I leave you the speech. Maybe I will say something later, or I will interact with you. But now I would like to give you and to leave you the speech for this, to face the topic of today.
You can try to stop to control my screen. So
I try to stop to control if I'm able to.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mauro, for the introduction. Mauro, just before you go, you need to know that I'm running a new updated version of Zoom. And for some reason, I'm just seeing my screen, which you're looking at now, but I don't see the participants, I don't see the Q&A, I don't see anything. So if there is a Q&A coming in, or if there is someone raising a hand, you may want to alert me, because
yes,
I can hear you. I don't even see my own video, so I just assume that everyone can see me talking now to this slide. But for those who are online, which is quite a large number, there is a Q&A box, question and answer. So you can fill in a question. There is no chat box on this session. So chatting between other participants doesn't work, but we do allow you to send some questions, and providing we can give you the answers on the slide itself, or Mauro will try to master this and see when do I have to be stopped to answer.
I will be your eyes. I'm looking to the question and answer, and I will interrupt you at the proper moment to.
Good. Okay, Mauro. So, last one for 2020. It's a good feeling. It's not a good feeling to be in 2020 to talk to screens instead of people, because I hate, in the meantime, do all these virtual meetings and webinars and training, because I am a person with social contact needs. And if I don't see people in a room, you cannot interact with them. There is almost no interaction here on the screen except for a boring Q&A box. But let's make the best out of it, because that is what 2020 has learned us, that we have to try to survive to what we are capable to do. So I hope that everyone is still healthy and safe. And the topic for today, as Mauro was saying, is very general, but it's talking about the IEC 61511 life cycle. And before we can do that, I want to take you back in history. Where does it come from? What is the reason behind there, and what happened? And I'm starting in 1996. Maybe some of you were just born. I don't know. I don't know the age of all the participants who are following this webinar. But in 1996, there was a first standard coming in the market, which was known as the IEC 84.01, which was the first life cycle approach in the market. The first life cycle approach for, let's say, process industry and for safety related system. So the safety life cycle that was actually coming out in 1996 was actually, to know the background, was because the committee in US was also being committee members of the IEC 61508, and the IEC 61508 draft was starting end of the 80s. Let's say 87, 88 was the first meeting where the 61508 committees were coming together. And that life cycle approach, which was actually based in the 61508, is also bringing the idea for the people in US from the ISA to launch that standard 1 year before the 61508 was finally being able to be released. Because as you know, there are 26 different nations such committees. So they all go through kind of voting, discussions and debates before they all start to agree and before you can finally release some of those documents. So the IEC 61508 specifically was a safety life cycle, and we will see this later for the title of the life cycle. This is to create functional safety for EEPES systems. The first E stands for electrical signals, the second E stands for electronic components, and the third PES abbreviation stands for programmable electronic safety related systems. And that was 1997, that was the first edition, which was out for the manufacturers, which in the beginning was mainly for the safety PLC manufacturers, but very quickly later on, it was for every instrumentation vendor who is selling or providing instrumentations to go inside your safety instrument functions, including also our good company here, GMI, has to follow that standard in able to prove evidence that they have done everything possible for a qualitative product, as well as on hardware as on software level. Now, in 2004, so we are moving closer to date already, it's 16 years ago now, but in 2004, there was a new release of a standard dedicated only for the process industry. And only for the process industry means this is not to be used for any other application other than oil and gas, chemicals, petrochemicals, and now since 2016, which we will see later, there are two new applications to it, to the process industry, which are the pharmaceutical and the food and beverage. What is important here to highlight is a small asterisk here in the symbol after the title, because the IEC 61511, when it was released in 2004, it was being a one-to-one copy equivalent to the ISA 84, has adopted the edition 1 of the 61511 with one small difference, that's the asterisk here. They have a modified clause, which is called the grandfather clause. And the grandfather clause was coming out of the OSHA, excuse me, the OSHA standing for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which is known as the Code of Federal Regulations reference, which we are showing you here in this title. Now, What is important to see here that the first one here, 1996, has been made obsolete with the introduction of the edition 1 of the 61511. The first edition of the 61508 from 1997 has been made obsolete with the introduction of the IEC 61508 edition 2, which was released in April 2010. And in 2010, there were some new definitions which are very important today. Although it's 10 years old, I can tell you from all the teaching and all the discussions or the inspections or assessments we do on projects, we can still see that people are still not 100% fit to understand the difference between road 1H, that's one dedicated route that a road that the manufacturers can select in terms of proving their design, their quantification of failures, etc., etc. Whereas the second one here, road 2H, is known as the proven in use. And that's the proven in use for the manufacturers, which is often being confused with the prior use for the end users or the operating company, because they both use the road 2H as an abbreviations. They both have different meanings, but the initial idea behind it is all you have to do is you have to collect quality failure data, feedback from instruments in the same environment, identical applications, etc., etc. The other thing you will have to know by the edition 2 of the 61508 April 2010 is something called systematic capability. And I can tell you in the early days, like 2010, 11, 12, 13, as of 2014, we saw the first certificates coming up, where now they are mentioning systematic capabilities. But I've still seen certificates still this year, 2020, that were released in 2015, where systematic capability has not been shown yet. And that is not the purpose of the standard. Systematic capability is the rigorousness of your design for the design of hardware or software quality, to see how good have you used your tables to control the failures and how good have you used the tables to avoid the failures. And that's called systematic capability on your design approach of your equipment. Now, the edition 1 of the 61511, which was released in 2004, has been released in a new edition 2 in 2016, and it was not released as smoothly as I would expect it. There were kind of issues with it, and that is why we have shown here two dates. We show you 2016, 2017. In 2016, edition 2 came out only with part 1 in February 2016, and I still remember the chairman of the edition 1 and of the edition 2. His name was Vic Maggioli, which unfortunately passed away after the release of the standard in 2016. But he sent us all an email, and he was quite clear to us, saying that he was certainly not impressed or happy that they managed to release the wrong draft in the edition 2, and that's why they had a corrigendum out in September 2016. I think you can see my cursor moving here on this date. And then we had an amendment out in August 2017. So anyone out there who is using the 61511 edition 2, make sure that you see the date of August 2017. At least you can search for this here. CSV stands for the consolidated version, which means that's the edition 2, which was originally released in February 2016, plus the corrigendum, plus the amendment. It's all being combined into one consolidated version, which is a 2017 release. And then we have part 2 and 3, which was released in July 2016. That is the informative parts, but I will show you that later. I got a slide for that, if I remember well. What is important here to understand now in terms of being fit to understand the purpose of the standard, you clearly have to understand what does it mean road 2H as per 61511. Because road 2H as per 61511, which is the preference for the use of your architectural constraint table, which is called table 6 in part 1 of the standard, there they're going to look for prior use. and it's prior use of your own failure data, Mr. End User or operating company, if you are listening into this webinar, not of someone else's data, not of some database which you may have purchased or may have been found somewhere on a other project which was not your environment, conditions, experience, your proof test efficiency, proof test intervals, etc., etc. So what I'm clearly saying here is Road to H is perfectly to be used based on quality feedback of your own failure data from your own instruments. Alternatively, you can go to Road to H, which is proven in use coming from the manufacturers. Now the question is, what is the quality data that the manufacturer may retrieve from installed equipment which is out there in the field? And that is then maybe the question that you could discuss before you understand where their proven and used data is coming from. And when prior use or proven in use quality feedback data is not available, the only alternative is to go back like we have done in 1997 by edition 1 of the 61508. We are trying a theoretical approach to try to investigate how reliable this equipment is, and this is still called today the Road 1H, which will be leading in safe failure fraction. And a safe failure fraction is the ratio of the fail-safe design or the quantity of diagnostics that are based in your equipment. And what was totally new for most of the people today is that you also shall carry out a SIS security risk assessment. Now, security and safety go both hand in hand. That is why the new edition 2 is now taking part of your process hazard and risk assessment in your phase number 1 of the life cycle. One of the new bullets in there in 2016 is saying you shall carry out a security risk assessment on your SIS installation. And that's something which is also part of the new standard now. And as you can see here, the edition 2 in 2016-2017 has not been adopted immediately by the ISA like they have done for the edition 1. The main reason, of course, was that they also realized that the new edition 2 that came out had some issues. So they first waited until they were having an amendment and a corrigendum on the things that were not 100% correct in the released standard. But it took them all the way until September 2018 for the ISA committee to come out with a new edition 2 of the old ISA 84.01. And they simply call it now, finally, after all these years, they also call it now ISA 61511, which is still the same functional safety SIS for the process industry sector. That's the same as edition 2 as we are running under the IEC standards. And the ISA approved that, as I said, with some delay and some debate. Right, let me go to the next slide. For those of you who do have access to the standard, well, the good thing is that the normative section, that means the normative, which we show here in this title in part number 1, only contains about 84 pages. So it's not a monster of a standard, it's only 84 pages. But in that normative section of the standard, you will find out your framework. The framework means they will tell you how the standard is being built up. They will show you the life cycle in there. They will give you in paragraph 3, they give you all the abbreviations and the definitions that will be used in that standard. Then in paragraph number 5, they will give you the functional safety management, where in paragraph 6, they show you then the life cycle and tell you then the idea behind the life cycle in terms of planning, in terms of documenting, in terms of verification, validation, etc., etc. And then mainly in phase number 4 or in chapter 11, you will see everything to do with hardware. That means how do you physically will actually combine equipment together. And then we have a topic, although it's called here software, we will call this now application programming. That means when you buy a safety PLC and you program some software in there, we no longer call this software programming, we call this application programming. That's a subtle change in name and in definitions from the edition 2. Then you will have project planning and management. That is how you will have to manage your projects in terms of what kind of requirements do you have to fulfill, what type of dependencies do you have to fulfill. In terms of management, they will look on who is responsible, who is accountable, where it has been documented, etc. They will, of course, give you the technical requirements. There is no secret that the level of SIL will also have different requirements in terms of how you will have to do your minimum hardware fault tolerance or your minimum architectural constraint. In documentation, well, as you can imagine, in safety, everything goes with documentation. Typically, we say in our training courses, you don't start anything before you have something on paper, because only then you can prove you have followed the paper correctly, yes or no. Without the paper, it's going to be very difficult. If it was a word of mouth that give you the instruction to do something. And of course, then here, the last bullet is the competency. As you may be aware of, there are many different competency schemes on the market. I am personally one of the original, let's say, trainers and also co-founder of the program, which is run by Theo Raymond and launched in 2004-2005. I think my correct count for 2020 finished at, I trained now 2,470 people in like 184 or 185 classes. That is including the last 4 or 5 virtual classes, which we have been giving after the summer period of this year. And that's all to do with the competency to prove you are competent in the content of the standard. Then here in part number 2 of the standard, there's the informative part. As the word is saying in English, it's informative. That means if you are required to comply to the standard, the minimum compliance that you have to prove is, of course, to the normative section, which is part number 1. But if you start to read part number 1 and you have no idea on how to do, on how to understand what you are reading, for instance, they say you shall do this, and you have personally no idea on how to carry this out or how to start, well, then in part number 2, the informative section is supposed to give you a, let's say, guidance and information on how to read and understand and achieve whatever part 1 normative section was asking. And I clearly said it is supposed to achieve that, because sometimes the committee members think it's normal that we should know that, and then they clearly say no further guidance have been provided. In part number 3, that's about 101 pages. So I forgot to tell you that. In part 2, it's about 200 pages. So in total, you're talking about 400 pages, where only 100 or 84 to be exactly correct here are normative. The rest are informative. In part number 3, will be mainly some techniques being explained. Techniques on how you can do some determination of SIL level. They will give you some examples. And I have to say you that those examples and even those formulas are informative. That means the way you are predicting your SIL level is not a normative requirement, not in the 61508, not in the 61511. It's a guidance with an example on how you can do it. That's also why you can never compare 2 calculations from 2 different engineers based on 2 different wisdoms, because there is no formula normative giving in the standard, which is a shame or a pity, but that's the way it is today in the market. And then there are some annexes in there. There will be annexes in there, something like systemic dependencies between your systems. There will be a chapter on there on LOPA, layer of protection analysis. There will be a chapter on there, which is known from the HSE, which is called ALARP, as low as reasonable practical. Those are all the sections which you can find here in part number 3. Okay, we came to the first poll section of this webinar.
Yes, yeah, we would like to have your, to interact with you, to have some information from you. Shall I launch the poll, Tino?
Okay.
Or you want to read it?
I can read it for them. So you have launched it. Thank you, because I have no access to this. So my interest, or our interest here of GMI, is clearly to understand who do we have listening into this webinars, because it gives a certain feeling on what is still out there in the field to be done in terms of education, awareness, etc., etc. So who of you today have access to the IEC 61511 edition 2, or maybe some people from the States, although it is too early for people in the States to be awake, who have access to the edition 2 of the ISA 61511, and you have different answers. I have access to one of them, but have not read or used it. I have access to one of them, and I'm using it. I have no access to none of them is answer number C. Answer D is I'm using edition 1, and answer E is none of the above. And I let Maru decide. I think still a few people, because I see a large number of participants being online. So I would say to you, wake up, do us a favor, and click one of those buttons which you have been giving. It doesn't cost you money. It's just to give us a feeling how many people can make a vote here.
Okay, just wait a few seconds again before to close to end the poll. Okay, I just end the poll right now, and somebody is voting. I have a hand.
Someone has raised their hand, Mauro, but I don't know what you have to check what it is. Okay.
I will check. I will check now. I will end the poll, and I will share the result at the moment. Okay. Here we are.
The majority of this group, which actually have been voting, is saying you have access to one of them and you are using it, which is actually a good news. That's a good feeling, because at least people know that there is a standard out there which is called good engineering practice. So there's nothing wrong by trying to understand what is good engineering practice meaning for safety instrumented systems. Now I have no access to none of them. That's of course not good, which is also 27% here. And I'm seeing that there's only 7% here of this group saying you are using edition 1. My advice would be, my strong advice would be, do not do that, because that means you are using an obsolete standard, which is already 4 years obsolete. It's better than nothing if you have nothing else available, but I can also tell you it is certainly not the purpose to use an obsolete standard, because there are so many things changed by edition 2 that you better be aware of. All right, Mauro, I will stop this and I will try to continue. Share the results. Okay. No, hang on. I'm trying to stop sharing the results. Let's stop this. I was trying to find this button, but there's something in my screen. Okay, finally. Right. So on the general life cycle overview. The overview itself of the life cycle, we have here 3 different colors. You see here a blue color or a bluish color. You see here a green one and a yellow one. Well, part 2 and part 3, in the 2 different colors here, green and yellowish, they are informative. That means they are not normative to prove compliance to. But part 1, everything in part 1, that is of course the normative section. And let's say the majority is all technical, but we also have another part in the standard, which we call the non-technical or the management items from the standard. There can be supporting parts to the technical, but it can also be supporting parts from a management point of view. So what do we say here in the first bullet? The IEC 61511 or the ISA 61511 life cycle, it is a performance-based standard, meaning that it's not prescriptive. It's not like you follow a recipe to learn to cook this evening and said, make so many ingredients, cook it this way, so many seconds, minutes, and then taste, do this, this, this. That's not how the standard will say. Standard will say, you shall do this. But then the way how you will have to achieve that, you will still have to perform through humans, and you will still have to have a certain engineering skill to achieve that. That means we call the standard a performance-based standard. It's not like just following a cookbook, and that will be your successful project. There are in the new edition 2 compared to the edition 1, many from the edition 1, you should do this, you should do that. That's all like nice to hear and nice to know. But they changed many of those in you shall do that. And the word shall in the English language means there is no other excuse than to do it. So whatever inspections that you may have on your project, on your activities in your project or in your life cycle, wherever was a shall requirement, that is of course very important to prove that you have carried out according to what the shall requirement was requesting from you. There are two fundamental concepts that are remaining in our IEC 61511 edition 2. One is the life cycle has remained the same. As you can see here in this blue part here in this first column called technical requirements, every single part in there and every single clause in there is the same clause number or the same chapter number as it was in the edition 1. The very small subtle change they made here is a text. Here in chapter 12 or clause 12, it used to be called software programming. As already mentioned, we will call this now application programming. But all the rest here in the framework itself of the life cycle has remained 100% identical. They changed the reasons behind some of those phases, especially on the functional safety assessments. That means on the inspections to the activities itself. They have quite, let's say, changed some important items on there. And they also changed quite a lot in the functional safety management of how to handle that, because that is now a must or a requirement to have for every single service supplier. Regardless if you're supplying a product or a service, you shall have a functional safety management system in place, and you shall prove how adequate you are using that for the activities you are accountable or responsible for. The other thing which also remains in there is the SIL level. And I'm pretty sure that everyone here today has heard about SIL levels, SIL 1, 2, 3, 4. And it is also a very well-known trend in the market that the lower the SIL number, the more successful you will find it back in your industry. Whereas the higher SIL numbers, and high is already called SIL 3, and even SIL 4 is the highest level. Well, SIL 4 was always from day one being mentioned. Do not build in the process industry a risk reduction higher than this factor 10,000 or to go into a SIL 4 band. Use other means of risk reductions or another way of design in able to reduce that requirement. I can also tell you now, out of experience, running in the field in functional safety for over 25 years now. I even lost count. You can see that the trend in the market is that SIL 3 is very rare to find in the current industry or in the modern process industry, which we are dealing with now. Application software rewritten as application programming already mentioned. FAT became normative. Very strange. Where is it here? Clause number 13, which is paragraph number 13, was in edition 1 mentioned. Between brackets, they were saying it is informative. And although it was being listed in the normative section part 1, that's only chapter 13. Maybe it was the unlucky number that made it an informative requirement. They make this now also, of course, normative, which makes sense. It would not really be logical if a system integrator would build a system. I'm saying we don't want to do any testing. Let's just ship it on site. We're going to test it later. I don't think this is the purpose of any, let's say, project quality measurements. And all references to the 61508 are to the edition 2, which is also important to mention that edition 1 has long been gone or is obsolete. So safety life cycle itself is like a working principle step per step. I'm going to show you a picture on the next slide. And a safety life cycle is actually a working principle method for the engineers to carry out the activities, in the hope that if they will follow this example of the life cycle, we will be able to try to increase the quality and to minimize the human failure. That's the whole purpose of the safety life cycle. It will describe you on when and how to document, inspect, verify, assess, audit, validate, etc., etc. That's the entire concept of the life cycle. And the second bullet is also remaining in the standards, which in my personal opinion, I would say that is something where I'm getting more and more frustrated to see that people are wasting all their time and energy in trying to predict when the instruments will not work when they need it. It's like asking this crazy question in 2020, do you know when you will die? And I'm pretty sure that all of us, we may have some statistics, and statistics in 2020 have never been more crazy than in this year because of the pandemic going on, of the COVID. That means that all those numbers of statistics means that something is changing on numbers, but that's the same on our instrumentation. Not that they are, let's say, open to be infected by the COVID pandemic, but what I'm trying to say is that all this wisdom of all these PFD calculations on all this equipment is purely a theory. And if I see how many people are actually putting effort to try to predict how accurate this can be, it's lunatic. It's absolutely crazy. And that's not the purpose of the standard, I have to say. The standard said you shall document the fair behavior of your safety instrument function. And the way we do that as engineers, we're trying to predict the number, saying what is the likelihood it will not need when I need it will not work when I need it. But the way we are approaching that, as I already mentioned to you, any commercial packet on the market today to try to predict SIL on your equipment, it's all based on their own interpretation on how they can do the calculation. That's one point, because there's no normative reference in the standard showing you exactly how to calculate. Second point, all the data that people are using around the world, it's another big question, like, where is this data coming from? Why do you think it's going to be applicable to you? Anyhow, PFD is still required on your equipment to predict the availability of your system. Stepping away from the SIL level, let's focus here on the life cycle, the topic for today. And I have, I think, 3 extra slides coming up where I will divide this into 3 different blocks. But as you see here, the beginning of any project is always starting with a very crucial phase, which is called phase number 1, which is your hazard and risk assessment. Typically, people will start to do a HAZOP. They will assign some study notes on their P&IDs. They will start to debate with a multidisciplinary a discipline team. They will start to debate what are the potential consequences if this cause is happening of a deviation from my process design intent point of view. That's typically what you will do with a HAZOP. In the meantime, you may have from your end user corporate offices or your operating companies, you may have your risk criteria, which is often used as a risk matrix, which will be calibrated by the corporate image to say that is acceptable in our, let's say, company, yes or no, or in our country, yes or no. And based on what you have found to be a potential risk, and based on the tolerable risk, which is acceptable by this client or not, we go here into phase number 2, which is not a must to follow, because I have to say, I know a few large chemical, let's say, clients who are refusing to use LOPA, because LOPA is one of these activity phases in the life cycle, which is an ideal tool for an engineer who loves to play with numbers. They typically look what is the budget allowance for what type of risk reductions they can afford, or they typically try to please their manager or something like that. And the LOPA will always come out to the numbers that they actually can afford or can justify to their supervisors, managers, etc. So what I'm trying to say is that often we see in the industry that LOPA is being engineering on paper to what you like to have. And that's, of course, not the purpose of the standard. There are some very good books on LOPA from our CCPS groups, but we do have this covered in our lengthy training courses, which we handle those topics more in depth, of course. Here in this webinar, it's only to get a feeling on how everything fits together. Then you go into phase number 3, which is your safety requirement specification. There is a good book out from GMI, which is called the SIL Manual. That's the 4th edition. It means it's the 4th print which is on the market. And there in chapter number 8, it's the one that I've written on the safety requirement specification. I'm doing one example of one safety instrument and function, and one safety instrument and function shall have 29 different items being explained and shall include, of course, as applicable. That's all known here in phase number 3, which has been described in chapter or clause number 10 from the normative section of the standard, which is part number 1. After you finish with that, we go into stage number 1. And stage number 1 is a independent functional safety assessment that needs to be carried out before you're going to start your design and engineering of phase number 4. Here you have your hardware design and engineering in clause number 11, programming in 12, FAT in number 13. All the design and developments of risk reduction is here clause number 9. That is in this clause number 9, which is the LOPA section. That's all the design and developments of risk reduction, which is not based on an SIS. You combine those together before you continue and you go on site to do installation, commissioning, and validation. You shall carry out stage number 2, which is again a senior, competent, independent person from a design team shall make an expert judgment to find out what is. I'm just looking here underneath my table because we have a new kitty in the room, and I left my door open of my office, and I'm just afraid it's going to hit the power button of my power socket there. But let's just hope the kitty will be nice to me today. So the installation, the commissioning, the validation that is on site, which is based on paragraph 14 and 15. And then we have stage number 3. And stage number 3 is again a senior independent competent person needs to make an expert judgment, and the same independent judgment needs to be independent from your design team. Here we have the operator and maintenance, and the operator and maintenance, it is then for, of course, for the end users and for the operating company. And there the operating company is known here in phase number 16 or clause number 16 or paragraph number 16. Stage number 4 is an independent assessment, again, senior competent person, not involved in the same operation, the same maintenance of the same SIS. That's a complete new requirement from the edition 2 of the standard. And we do have dedicated webinars. If you look for functional safety assessment, you will hear a lot more about those stages and independencies in there. And last but not least, here we have modification and decommissioning, which again, stage 5 is a new requirement by the edition 2 that shall be carried out before and after your modification or phase number 7. Everything must be managed. Everything must be following the assessments and the auditing. Everything must be planned and structured. And of course, every single phase here on the right-hand side needs to be verified. That's like a summary of the life cycle activities, how they're all linked together. It deals with specific activities and specific responsibilities / accountabilities for those activities who are being carried out. It will also identify the required competencies per phase activities that needs to be part, of course, of your functional safety management. It will also identify the needs for documentation. It will deal with functional safety management, verification, validation, assessments, and audits, as I just showed you on the life cycle. And of course, we're going to have different life cycles for an end users versus a system integrator versus a hardware software developer, etc., etc. Okay, Maro, we have a second poll.
Yes, another moment where we ask you some feedback. So here are some questions. I launched the poll, giving you the chance to provide an answer. Yeah.
Okay. So the edition 2 lifecycle activities and requirements are changing per SIL level, are irrelevant of the SIL level, are not applicable for a SIS builds before February 2016. None of the above. So I would like to have your vote here. So think about the lifecycle activities and requirements. Would they be changing as per SIL level? Would they be irrelevant? That means it doesn't matter which SIL level you try to achieve. Those lifecycle activities are applicable? Or do you think that the new lifecycle activities descriptions are not applicable for a SIS which is built before February 2016? That means could be maybe based on edition 1, could be maybe based on edition nothing, maybe before 2004, whatever could be there, the ID. Okay, so again, we only have a third. Let's wait a bit. I always like to have at least 50% of people that are following a webinar are not just sleeping. They actually click on a button. That's all we ask from you.
Let's wait a few votes again.
I can go and strike, Maro. I will not continue until we have the minimum required clicks on it. No?
Okay. Okay, I think you reached that. We reached that, and we can go. So I end the polling and I share the result with all of you. And
okay.
Here it is.
Very good. Well, the good news is that the majority, at least 50% of those who voted, are all correct, saying it is irrelevant of the SIL level. So those phase activities are not changing the requirements towards the SIL level for SIL 1, 2, 3, or providing that if you would think you have a SIL 4, which I don't think you would ever need that, but anyhow, they are irrelevant. That means the only thing that may change on the SIL level requirements is just the architectural constraints, but the rest is all remaining the same. So changing per SIL level, that first answer A, was actually one of the misconceptions which I see still happening when we are doing like poll sessions or we are doing some, let's say, training and we are talking to some people. There are some people having the idea that for a SIL 2 you have to do different things than for a SIL 1, and that is not correct. So not applicable for a SILs build before 2016 is also not 100% true, while we have now a very similar approach like the grandfather clause from the edition 1, which was being adopted by the IEC 8401. They clearly gonna prove, they clearly gonna ask you evidence to prove that your systems are still maintained on the requirements as they were designed, even when they were designed before the edition 2 has been launched. That means any project from before 2016, doesn't matter from which date it was, you have to prove you still maintain it, you still test it, you still achieve the requirements which were required at the initial stage. That is also part now of the edition 2. All right, Maro, I will stop this. I will continue, and by memory.
Tino, just one comment. Somebody is claiming that he cannot see the poll question, and I believe there is some setting in somewhere which allow the pop-up of the poll to come in. So you should please check that.
It's weird because if there's only one and the rest could see it, that means the platform that we provided is not the problem. So it is most likely, if you would start to investigate, it would most likely be one of the famous software features of your current installation that you are watching this webinar with. That's my pure guess, and I'm probably will not be far off the truth, that it's somewhere a revision number problem, whatever.
Yeah, or maybe some setting to allow or not allow a pop-up to come in. I will check also with our IT, so I will be ready for the next time.
What we could do is on this particular person, if you would send an email at the end, we can make a snapshot or a picture of the poll. Although you have seen the share, we have shared it, and it will be already in our recorded version. Anyhow, apologize for that. But that's the beauty of using software nowadays. Every day there's a new problem popping up, like me also. I'm talking blind. I have no control. I just see a slide. All right. So I'm sure that if I would start to complain, it will be a deal between Microsoft versus, or it's not Microsoft here, this one. This is Zoom versus my Apple, whatever revision of Apple iOS that I'm using here. Now, let me summarize for you, because what I just explained on the life cycle, I'm trying to visualize this here better for you. The first block here, we call this the analysis phases. Very, 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 very crucial in any project. Because if you miss to identify your hazard, you will never think about what kind of risk do we have. And if you do not know what kind of risk you have, you will never ask yourself the question, do we have to reduce this risk? Because it is not there in the first place. That also means you will never write a safety requirement specification for something you do not know yet. That means the analysis phase, although some people say in the projects, well, that's maybe 6 months in the projects, and that's more paper and it's more maybe the formalities. Actually, it's not. It's the crucial moment in any project for a success story afterwards. Because once you move into the realization, once you start to build systems, people are supposed to build the systems exactly as the safety requirement specification have been defining it. But when your safety requirement specification definition is not as accurate, complete, or correct as it should be, you cannot assume or imagine that the system integrator will all of a sudden start to build a great system for you because it hasn't been specified correctly. And that is why it's a quite important item here to show here in this air gap. You see here stage 1. Stage 1, this functional safety assessment is a must-do in the normative requirement section of the standard edition 2 SIG 1511. Every stage, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, every assessment, all 5 of them has to be carried out, which is in contradiction to what edition 1 of the IEC SIG 1511 was saying. Because there they said you have to prove one assessment, although stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were also proven or also shown in the same context on the same life cycle approach. You were only required by edition 1 to prove minimum 1 assessment, and the latest you could wait was stage number 3, known as typically called the PSSR. That's the pre-safety startup reviews. That means that before you introduce a hazard in your production unit, you shall carry out such an expert judgment by an independent senior competent person, independent from the design teams. Now, in phase number 2, you realize, you install, commission, you validate. In between, you have stage 2. That means after your FAT is finished on system integration facilities, that is where typically a stage 2 is being carried out as a witness test on the FAT. And stage number 3, as I just mentioned, that's the very famous one called the PSSR. Typically, that is before we introduce the hazards in the production unit, you shall carry out such a senior expert judgment by a competent person not involved in the same design from the same SIS of the one you're trying to make judgment from. And finally, in block number 3, that's for the end users operating companies. Clearly, you have to operate, maintain your system. If there will be a modification, you have to follow the right MOC, management of change, means that you will have your request, your impact analysis, you will have done your brainstorming. Can you carry out this modification, maintaining my safety function being operating, yes or no? Can I also maintain my function safety, yes or no? If all that has been given the green light to go ahead, then you have here the independent assessment, stage 5, have to be carried out before you start the modification and after. And everything must be managed, everything must be planned, and everything must be verified. What I just explained you is here in this text, so in able to win a little bit of time for Q&A, I will briefly go through here. So what I just explained you in phase 1 requires that the PHRAs are being carried out, including security risk assessment, which is new by edition 2. It requires that allocation to safety function to existing protection layers. That's the famous LOPA or layer of protection analysis. As we know in phase 2 activity, phase 3 activity is when you cannot meet your tolerable risk, you have to come up with an additional risk reduction, an additional safety intermittent function or safety loop. That's what needs to be described in the SRS. And then also, you need to also define what kind of logic, application interlock logic, do you have to program between your in and out of your safety instrumented system. And last but not least, carry out the FSA at stage 1 is a normative important item. To summarize the realization phases, that's phase number 4 and 5. Design and engineering needs to be done as per your requirement specification in terms of architecture, hardware configuration, application programming, and system integration. It will specify techniques and certain targets of SIL levels that you will have to achieve. FAT, it needs to be followed by an independent assessment, which is called stage 2. Again, that's normative important as a requirement on the standard life cycle. Design and development of other means of risk reductions can be here, this green block here, which was this coming out of this paragraph or clause number 9, which is actually during the LOPA being decided. And then once you go on site, do installation, commissioning, and final validation, means with a full integrated system, you have to do your site acceptance test known as a validation activity. that needs to be followed by an independent expert judgment, which is called here your stage number 3. And last but not least, in the operator and maintenance phase for the end user's operating company requires that you are collecting quality data that we have not mentioned yet, but that's the main topic of the edition 2 of the IEC 61511, that you collect quality feedback data of failure data of your own equipment and installation with your own proof test efficiency, consistency, etc. A stage 4 is new by edition 2, is a periodic assessment, and periodic is mainly dictated or let's say forced by the regulatory bodies. As an example, in the United Kingdom or in the UK, HSE is requiring every 36 months or every 3 years, you shall carry out an independent expert judgment by a senior competent person not involved in the same operations and the same maintenance of the same SIS. And last but not least, the modification part, typically controlled by MOC, needs to be carried out. A FSA before that stage 5 needs to be carried out before the modification takes place, and after it has been carried out needs to be again an assessment. Stage 5 needs to be followed up after you have done your or implemented your modification, and decommissioning follow the same principles as the modification. And the last slide on this life cycle is generic. Generic means it's applicable for all phases 1 all the way till 8. Generic 1 is the phase number 9, which is known as the verification phase. Basically, you're not allowed to move from one activity into the other activity before the verification has been carried out. That verification will be leading into a verification document called a verification report. That report will be needed for an independent judgment from your functional safety management point of view. Everything in safety needs to be planned, of course. We cannot just say, let's do tomorrow something without having a clear schedule or planning documents, etc. And every activity in safety needs to be verified before we carry out. But your FSM here is a quality measurement on all those activities to prove that we are trying to minimize our human failure. Last poll question for myself, and then Mauro will run some Q&As.
Yeah, okay, let's do the last poll question, and there is a question, so let me...
I can read the question in the meantime, Mauro.
Okay, if you, yeah, it is very simple. What is the difference between SEAL and systematic capability?
That's a big difference. You cannot get SEAL without systematic capability. Basically, well, I'm just thinking loud now. That's not 100% correct. So let's skip this. So a SEAL level is a safety integrity level. That's a measurement on the, let's say, availability of your equipment. Whereas the systematic capability is more a qualitative measurement on the rigorousness of design principles for hardware and or software design. I give you an example. Enable to achieve a systematic capability of 2, so SC2, you will have to prove in about 400 measurements, which are part of the section part 2 and part 3 from the 61508. You will have tables for SIL 1, tables for SIL 2, tables for SIL 3, etc., etc. And those measurements are clearly the measurements to control the failures and to avoid the failures. And if you comply to all the measurements to control and avoid the failures in the table of SIL 2, you will be awarded a systematic capability equal to 2. That means your design rigorousness of your design quality of your design of hardware and software has fulfilled all the measurements of the standards listed in this SIL 2 table. But the SIL integrity level itself is based on the probability of fail upon demand estimation on the design of that system, together, of course, with the architectural constraints which the manufacturer will have to do. I got here another question, 1 out of 2. I think this is 1 out of 2, but it's called, I can read it as 1002, but it should be 1 out of 2, 2 out of 2, 2 out of 3. I would say for that, I will skip that because I can probably talk about a half an hour of that. Which is better and why? Well, it's not fair to ask this question this way. You should first tell me, what are you interested in? in safety or in production availability? If you do that, I may give you some answer on that. Should all vendors involved in safety projects with SIL target have an FSM procedure or an FSM certificate? A certificate, no. Should follow the FSM procedure, yes. Certificates is not a requirement from the standard. Certification is only used by marketing to sell between vendors to prove that one is better than the other. But the IEC standards 61508 and 61511 do not require certification. In the meantime, we solved all the Q&As. Let me jump on poll number 3. So, who of you have followed a competency review program on? I told Mauro they already answered. No? Okay. So I would like to know. Have you followed?
Sorry. Maybe I'm doing something.
I think you clicked it away. I think it was
No,
there.
no.
No? Or maybe
No. This is not a repetition of a question.
No. I'm not female. I cannot
before we were asking who was reading this standard.
Okay. No problem. So who of you have followed a competency review program on edition 1 and still has a valid, for the moment, certificate, means a competency certificate on your own name? Who of you has followed the 61511 edition 1, but your certificate in the meantime, your competency certificate is expired? Who of you has followed edition 2 and has a valid certificate? And who of you has not followed any competency review program on the IEC standards? Okay. All right, Mauro.
Okay.
Wait. We only have. Come on, guys. You have to do better. If you expect me to answer out of the blue your Q&A, give us then some respect and click on the poll we are providing to you now.
Meantime, somebody's also raising some question, but let's close.
I can some questions in the meantime. I got a question: is the IEC 61511 applicable for fire and gas systems as well? That's a good question. As per edition 2 in the standard, we have a technical report number 4, which was released in February 2020, and it is clearly mentioned in the technical report, which is not normative, that's informative, that also mitigation layers, such as, for instance, the fire and gas layers, needs to be built reliable, and that's why they say you can also use the same principles of reliability as the 61511 for your prevention layer, which is your isolating layer or your SAS layer. So the short answer is yes. FNG or fire and gas also can follow now the 61511. Is cybersecurity part of any new standard? Of course it is. There are many standards on the market. The main one you have to look for is called IEC 62443, which is a standard, which is the leading one coming from the old ISA 99. All right, Mauro, let's just go on the poll now. And let's share that. Okay, so I'm just trying to close that. Okay, let me just move this away. Okay, who of you has followed? So we have someone following the edition 1 and still has a valid certificate. Well, the good news is that may be true today. The bad news is it will not be good next year. Why is that? Because edition 2 of the standard is out since 2016. So whoever have teacher the course based on the edition 1 after 2016, that's not a good approach. As of 2016, we were supposed to train you with the edition 2. I can tell you myself, as I have done many trainings worldwide, we're only adopting edition 2 in our training material as of January 2017. So you could say, if you are one of those unlucky engineers who followed in 2016 the course towards the end of the year, you may have been still trained with edition 1, but actually edition 2 was out. So my advice would be for you who still have a valid certificate, look when is your expire date. I would estimate it will expire most likely in 2021, late 2021, because it would not be fair to train you in 2018 with an old edition of the standard. Only 30% has been trained with the new edition 2, which at least is 30%, but scary to see that people have none of the above. I will not say scary. It's surprising because there are many competency schemes on the market available. We're not saying we have to follow one, but we're just saying there are some schemes on the market leading in trying to make people more aware. All right, I will summarize because I'm looking at my clock. It's not all about just a SIL level and a PFD number only. As I see the trend in the market, is it you, Maro, launching this again, or was it me? No.
To be honest, I tried to close it.
Okay. Is it not closed now?
For me, yes.
For also the rest is closed, so it's
Okay.
gone. Okay. So the thing that I have noticed in the industry is that since the release of the 61508 in 1997, the first 10 years, everyone was going wild, talking about SIL levels and PFDs, and everyone is making all this wonderful calculation and all this estimation, which is all based on a kind of a theory. But as the trend was continuing into the industry, in the process industry, I see that more and more people are blindly foolish to clearly believe any SIL number they've been giving or any PFD number which they may come up with a calculation based on numbers. And that's not the purpose of the standard. Yes, we do have to document the fair behavior, and we do that by evidence on how available the system is with a PFD number. But I would beg you, do not focus too much on that number. As long as the number is still in your SIL performance band, which was the requirement for your risk reduction, that's all I would be looking at. I would more look on how do I carry out those activities and how do I prove I have minimized my human failures, because that is where the real safety will lay. Because all the incidents worldwide, the majority is always due to humans. You take the human out of the equation of any incident, and the incident most likely will not happen. But without the human, the project will also not being executed or being erected. That means you need to have the human activities always involved. So we have to do an increase of quality with function safety management in the hope we're going to decrease the human failures. That's the main purpose from day one from our functional safety standard. It's not automatically achievable. Functional safety is a culture, it's a passion, it's a behavior of people, it's a mindset that needs to be learned, trained, taught, and it needs to be actually being followed up very closely by expert judgment, by independent people to prove you are still carrying out the way you were supposed to be carrying out. Right. In summary, we as GMI, we can help you with all kinds of services for lifecycle support on 65011, and we do support lifecycle support also on the 62443 standard. We mainly also support you with training, and I can already tell you now that 2021 all the way till summer will mainly be virtual training for all the programs we are showing here on Functional Safety Engineer SIS, on Fundamentals of Cybersecurity, and on on the Industrial Automation Control System Cybersecurity Risk Assessment, or on the SRA, as I was trying to find the abbreviations. Now, those courses are all under the umbrella or under the program of the committee from the TOV Rhineland, are all subject to write an exam. The exam today is still based on paper, but we are very close to come to a alternative, which will be a virtual exam also for the future. But we are not there yet. We are still in the last final tuning of some debates on how secure and how safe those virtual exams can be. But as I said, we are making some good progress in the last couple of weeks. So we are hopeful that by next year we can go 100% virtual on everything. In alternative, what GMI has done with the help of Mauro, which is also here in the webinar, we have set up a whole range of exam centers throughout the world. So you can still follow virtual training and go to one of our exam centers to write physically in person an exam, following, of course, all the COVID applicable rules in the exam center where you will be located. We do customized in-house trainings and seminars or webinars as we are doing now. And of course, next year, 2021, we will have some more webinars available. And my final slide is this last one here is the book, Manual Edition 4, the 4th edition of the Safety Instrument System from GMI, which is applicable, or it is available, that if you do have a request to get an access to the book, you have sent us an email, and then I'm sure that some of us in GMI will follow this up. I will stop this. I will stop sharing, which I'm trying to do now, and I will give the word back to Mauro.
Yes, I'm going to share the question and answer presentation. This is the last portion of our webinar. I would like to, since I was going through the questions that was raised during the registration, I would like to answer a few of them. Somebody is asking to show some example of SRS, and I want to say that we have dedicated webinar on SRS. You just monitor our schedule on our website, and you will find if this specific seminar webinar will be repeated. If not, on our YouTube channel, this is available. Somebody else was asking to have copy of the presentation. You will all receive a copy of the presentation together with a link to YouTube channel in order to access all other webinars which are on several topics. Many of them on functional safety, but we have also many of them on intrinsic safe issue, hazardous location issues. We have some application, some product, some description of how some of our product can help in solving problems, and so on and so on. Now we have this question and answer. We have also at the moment a couple of questions open. You know,
I think one already. I can read them. How to get a 6.15.11 hard copy? Very simple. It's a copyright, let's say, document. You can require this from the IEC.ch. That's the IEC website from Switzerland. So again, IEC.ch. You go to the web shop. You search for IEC 6.15.11, and you have different options, or you buy it electronically only, or you buy it in a hard copy, or you buy it for single license or multiple license. I mean, there are all kinds of variations available. Does it deal with software safety standards? I do not understand that question. As I told you, the 6.15.11 is made for the safety instrumented systems to achieve functional safety, mainly using safety PLCs. Those safety PLCs that you program, we call this application programming. So if your question was for software, meaning application programming, then the answer would be yes. Then it would be paragraph 12, which is the application programming story in the 6.15.11. And the last one, Mauro, I got a long question here. I think that person means the SIS, but he calls here the triple S. If the triple S is sending a hardwired signal to stop the PCS as part of the functional safety, should it be a 203 or a single hardwired signal? Question mark. That's like asking, yeah, okay, good. Or the PCS and SIS should be fully independent. On the last section, the answer is yes, period. Fully independent and separate is a requirement from the chapter 11, from the normative requirement from the standard. Now, does it have to be a 2 out of 3 or a single hardwired signal? I don't understand how your PCS itself can be part of functional safety, as most likely your PCS or your DCS or your BPCS, whatever you call this abbreviation here, is most likely not safety related, not IEC 6.15.11 related item. You can have an interlock where maybe the SIS will demand your PCS interlock to do something, but that cannot be any safety integrity level for that. All right, Mauro.
Okay.
Let's close that. Close this also. And I got one more question. Yes, I'm looking for application program for PLCs and related safety standard to be followed. Okay, so the question changes a little bit. That's again from the same person that was asking before the 6.15.11. So it's very minor described in the IEC 6.15.11 on how to program the system, because the system is most likely being based on vendor-related available libraries. They will not explain you on when to use an AND gate or an OR gate. That is your engineering skills that you have to prove yourself. But as per 6.15.11, your application program safety requirement specifications should be very clearly explained on how to program that safety PLC. I hope that is answering your question. If not, feel free to question something different again. All right, Maro, let's just finish this.
Yes, we have almost 4 questions to the end. I leave you reading that because...
Okay, I'll read it. I'm interested to understand how we can verify compliance with the 6.15.11 in the commissioning and the operating phases. So that is phase number 5. Okay, Maro, continue. Right, compliance and commissioning and operations, which is phase number 5. I'm recommending you to listen, as Maro was saying, we have everything available on the YouTube channel from GMI webinars. Search for the functional safety assessments, because in there we're going to explain you also what is this stage number 3, which is coming after exactly that phase number 5. And phase number 5 is the installation, commissioning, and validation. And clearly, after such an activity execution, the senior expert judgment, independent from the design team, is a must do or must requirement to carry out. Okay, Maro.
Okay, this is a simple question. Would like to know.
Company
Okay, please.
to become compliance. Okay, that's a very generic question. All right, Maro. Based on the definition from the edition 2 of the 6.15.11, the requirement is any supplier. That means if you're now, and I'll give you a few examples, if you're now a system integrator, or you are an EPC contractor, or you are an operating company end user yourself, all of you all carry out an activity in the life cycle. That means all of those categories of companies which I just mentioned, that means for everyone that is supplying a service or a product in the life cycle, shall have a functional safety management system in place and shall prove how adequate he or she is using that to carry out the activities which they are responsible or accountable for. So regardless the nature of your company, everyone shall have and proven that you have an FSM and you prove you deliver it as per the description in your FSM. And many companies having a third-party accreditation, that means again, they come up with a certificate from a third party to prove that someone has made a judgment that their company is carrying out the activities as per the 6.15.11. Okay, Maro? Important difference between the 6.15.11 and the 6.15.08 life cycle. Okay. Well, the principles, the frameworks are the same. They go from top to bottom in the middle. They go from a concept for the 6.15.08 to decommissioning in the 6.15.08 in the left-hand slide here, whereas the right-hand slide is showing you the life cycle which we explained. So the principal approaches are the same. It's phase activities, phase per phase, one by one described. We call this the waterfall principles. That means you first finish phase 1 before you are allowed to start on phase number 2. In reality, often not really the way we're going to work. We're going to combine those, we're going to do overlapping, etc., etc. But the principle of the standard are phase activities one by one that needs to be verified. What is different are the assessments on the 6.15.08 versus the assessment on the 6.15.11, whereas the 6.15.08 is the assessments showing as per level of SIL, that the independencies will change for SIL 1, 2, 3, whereas the assessments here on the 6.15.11 are the same for stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5, regardless what SIL level you're going to achieve. Okay, Maro.
So we have, I was trying to, okay.
Just want to hear from the experts in the field about 6.15.11 and the impact on the process industry. I think
this is the last prepared question. Then we have other questions from the audience.
The last question officially on 2020.
Yes.
Good. Okay, Maro, go ahead.
Good.
All right, let me think. What was the impact was the question. Well, as I said, the impact is most likely money. It's investments. As everyone knows, a SIL 3 costs more than a SIL 2 or a SIL 1. To buy it, to build it, to maintain it, to operate it. So clearly the whole SIL business since 1997 until today is billions of US or billions of euros of turnover that has made for equipment manufacturers, for EPCs, for end users investing in that. So that is certainly something that needs to be thought of. That SIL itself has had an impact on the way we are focusing on that. And that's also the reason why SIL 3 is getting more and more not popular because of that. And too many people and too many, let's say, engineering companies, end users or engineers are blindly focusing on that SIL number only and on that calculation. They are producing useless paper called reports, and they all start to believe it is all true until you start to question, where does it come from? How can you prove that? I'm going to give you a very small example. How many end users do you know that gonna replace a valve, shutdown valve, which is today still working because the useful life has been over? The useful life, maybe I was yesterday talking to a valve manufacturer. They recommend useful life is 5 years. So I asked him how many times is the same end user after 5 years is doing a revamp of this valve, or how many end users are actually doing the necessary testing as they should do. And the answer was, well, the minority, Tino. I said, exactly. So they all say they have a number, they have a certain, let's say, availability prediction on this valve, but they don't maintain the valve as they should. Edition 2, release 2016, it's all about the quality data. It's all about proving what is your mission time, your useful life, your proof test efficiency, your proof test coverages. How can you prove all that? And that is the main purpose of the Edition 2. So I would say there's still a great attempt of the Edition 2 to try to ask the people to prove that this is all being followed, but we're not there yet. As I said, we still have a long way to go. People often do not know what they don't know yet. That means there is still a lot of people believing paper without thinking about it, and they just take it for granted. And that's, of course, something we should try to change. Okay, Maro. I think we are...
So we have this slide, which was in somehow already discussed. Just let me have the chance to repeat. We are working out a new schedule, so very soon it will be available on our website. We will have new webinars, so follow up the website, and I'm sure you will find other subject and topics of your interest. In the meantime, there is another small question.
Can you tell us a safety PLC vendor dealing with triple modular redundancy at CPU level and IO level? Well, I will not do that, as we are here in a neutral webinar. It's not me to do marketing for those vendors. So I'm pretty sure there are not so many vendors providing you with TMR or triple modular redundant. You can count them on one hand, that is I can tell you, so the search will not be long. Let them explain to you how the system is really built. Although I used to work for one of them, it's not here me to do marketing for them. Let their salespeople or technical people answer that question to you better than I can do. All right, Maro.
Okay, I launched in the meantime the last poll. We would like the audience to rate our performance, mainly your performance. First of all, we would like to know if what we are doing which cost us some time, effort, and so on. We would like to have a feedback from you. And okay, from what I can see, it is a very positive feedback. Very soon I will be showing. And as a very last thing, I would like to mention, to show you our email address, our contact address. You can get in touch with us in case of any topics you may have. We are available for you. And what else? Wish you all the best for the coming days. For us, it will be Christmas time. We will take some rest from a strange year. And we are looking forward to start again with 2021 It will be different from 2020, hopefully, but it will also be different from any other previous year. This 2020 years, this COVID gave us somehow push us and gave us a chance to do some change. Okay, let's follow us again online, and hopefully we will have the chance to see us in person.
I've shared the poll, Maro.
Okay, you have shared it. So I think we got a good result. Thank you, Tino, for that. This is in line with what, to be honest, I was expecting. And again, nothing else. Thank you. Would you like to add anything, Tino?
No, from my part also. I wish everyone a good year end. Still strange, but as I said, we have to survive to what we are allowed to do or move or something like that. We do have more topics coming up, especially on functional safety, but also on EX. We have some new webinar topics being discussed currently, not being decided, all of them, but there will be a regular update on the GMI webpage of webinars, providing we have the time. We also will launch most likely by the first week of January, or maybe even before, but we will launch a new schedule on in which regions we will provide virtual training. And then yes or no, there will be some exam written on paper, or we by then have maybe some solution for virtual exam. That is, of course, would be the ultimate, but I'm old-fashioned. It's me holding it back, because I know what security is via digital media, and nothing is secure because everything can be somehow being foolish or copied or being hacked, etc. That is why we are very reluctant to put all our measurements of safety on the virtual exams. Thank you for all your time. Thank you for all the questions. There were, well, certainly some very good questions in there. I hope we have answered at least in the capacity we could. And that's it for me. I would say thank you. And I see one more Q&A coming in.
It's just looking forward for the schedule on virtual training. So.
Okay. Yes.
Some more comment.
Schedule. It's again. Well, we had certain revisions available, but we keep on changing them, and that is the reason why every time we think we are there, we have another idea. So we keep on changing them. Okay, but we will have. All right. Mario, you stay online, or do you want to do a second Zoom call with me? Or
we do a second Zoom call. Thanks to all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.